temporary quarters until we got shipped up into France. So it was some guy had out and back wanted to go out to the latrine, and there was a empty hole there, and he fell in it and hurt himself, I guess. But that was bad because it was so dark you didn't see it. Next morning, I could see the debris in the bottom of the hole, so it must have been a painful fall. Verviers, Belgium is up in the area where a lot of the heavy fighting went on during the Battle of the Bulge, like Bastogne and other areas. So there was a lot of destruction there. After a few days in Verviers, they moved us down to Villerue, France, a little ways south of there, which is the south of Luxembourg. And they put us in the old Maginot Line, some French barracks. It was very cold. It was still cold, and they had a stove, which was lined with brick, I think. Someone told me they had a reason for it, but I don't know what it was. I guess basically the idea was to get it hot, and it would stay hot all day. But it took forever to get hot. It was cold. And until I found to wrap my feet in my Eisenhower jacket to keep them warm, then I could stay warm. Our sleeping bag was just one of these mummy sleeping bags with a water-resistant cover, so it wasn't very warm. That mummy bag, all it is a wool blanket shaped with a zipper, so when you sleep out when it's frosty or cold, you can see it wouldn't be very warm. We one day, there was a truck going up to Luxembourg, I think to the Red Cross there. So I and a guy got in it. We went up to Luxembourg City, and time to come back. When we got back, the truck had already gone. So here we are. I don't know how far it is, 20 miles maybe, from Villerue. So how are we going to get home? Well, we started walking, I guess, and fortunately, this little ways out of town, a Jeep came by, and we hitched a ride on it. And these guys were they were going somewhere, I don't know, from the front and going to get something. And that was quite an experience to ride in that Jeep. They're like maniacs, but I always remember that Jeep ride. If you wondered where the generals' foxholes were, here's one right here in Luxembourg City. This was the headquarters for the armies in Europe at this time. So no wonder generals love war so much. Then in the next day or so, we would go into Villerue, France. We met a nice Frenchman who gave us coffee or tea or something, and we talked and had a good time. And then we'd be back to the base. During World War II, the Japanese forced Korean women into what they euphemistically called comfort houses. But I've never heard this mentioned before, but the U.S. Army also had their comfort houses for American soldiers, at least in France and at least in this area. I don't know of any area where they had them, any other areas where they had them, but there was one in Villerue. Whether it was in the rest of the France, I don't know. However, the girls were not forced into this. It was strictly volunteer. Besides, prostitution was legalized in France at this time anyway. One of the days while we were in the Maginot Line, I looked up and there were hundreds of B-17s heading towards Germany. Must have been one of the last big raids of the war. Sort of overkill, because what else was there left to destroy other than having a little fun breaking things without being much danger of being shot down. Wouldn't it have been great to save those bombs and send them back to the manufacturer for a refund against the cost of the war? But I think it was the last big raid of the war. Some years ago, when we took we took Frank Brown, Kay's dad, on a trip to Europe, we went to Villaroo. We went to the Maginot Line, and here's a picture of us in front of one of the bunkers there. So after a few days, as the front kept going forward, they kept moving us. So our next stop would be Worms, Germany. So we, at Worms, the war was getting near the end now. Now I was in the artillery, and I didn't know one end of an M1 from the other, except what I saw in the movies. So they hand me an M1 once that says you're on guard duty. Well, you know, there's a manual of arms. Infantry has a manual of arms. Obviously, when you're holding a rifle in your hand, you can't do a hand salute. So the infantry has a manual of arms. You come to attention holding your rifle a certain way, and you go through the motion. So that's what I learned in about 2 minutes. The artillery just has sling, shoulder arms, and that's it. So, but in the infantry, if you come to attention, you got to have some sort of a manual arms again. But anyway, I practiced for a couple minutes, and I was in an infantryman. In spite of being the enemy, the little German kids, they didn't seem to be afraid of us. In fact, they were playing around where we were, where the camp was. I think maybe this time I was on guard duty. And I noticed 3 or 4 of them were playing and running. One of the kids was so skinny, and he had on these big shoes, and he could hardly run, but he was trying to play. I guess kids can play most anywhere. And here in Worms is where the war ended. I had a picture of those of us who were together in our tent, but somehow over the years I lost it. But we did have the picture taken the day the war ended. Now, the big job is to ship some of the outfits to the Far East for the war going on there, or if you got a lot of points, they send you home for discharge. The 3rd Infantry Division, the one I was in, they decided that we would do occupation. And so I was then sent to Salzburg. On the way down there in the truck, we could see all on the Autobahn the jet fighters that the Germans had hidden in the trees alongside the road. And fortunate for the Air Force, they didn't develop it sooner. So I was sent to the 3rd Infantry Division Headquarters Battery for the artillery. And there I stayed until we were shipped up into Germany for the occupation. The house I was, war brings out the worst in people. My room must have been the master bedroom, because we're right above the entrance there. You see me there. And they were having the Germans turn in all their arms of all kinds, even starter pistols. And in fact, as I took out a couple machine guns from the mountainous pile of weapons, and in that mess I got this pistol. I didn't know what it was. It had a big hammer on the back. It's kind of strange, but it turned out it was a starter pistol. And I was in my bedroom, and I was doing target practice with one of the books there I was going to. And I put the first 22 in it, and I aimed it at the book, and bang, and the shell goes whizzing back over my head. Darn near put my hands out. Fortunately, it missed me, but it was just a starter pistol, and it was no way to keep the shell casing. The bullet was heavier than the casing, so the casing would shoot backwards. One bomb hit Salzburg. It was aimed at the train station, but instead it hit the big church, collapsed the roof, and then some other damage. The whole roof was demolished. Fortunately, the whole cathedral wasn't demolished as it was in Cologne. At this time, they were doing two things: shipping the old-timers back home who had the points to go, and disarming the Germans, well, the army, Austrians, some of them. There was still one more major problem, which was the refugees. They were known as displaced persons, or DPs. But there were no radio operated jobs open, so I had to do various driving jobs or doing nothing at all. Here is a picture of two little girls who were passing by one day with an adult lady, and I just asked them to take my picture while I held them. Years later, I came back and met these two girls grown up, and I'll tell you more about that later. We required the Germans to turn in all their weapons, and we had a big pile of those things, huge pile. So I picked out a couple of machine guns and an Italian rifle, and I sent them home. You could still send them home. They didn't open them, didn't have x-rays yet. So I got two submachine guns home, the Smisher and the grease gun, plus the Italian rifle. I had to get rid of them later, sorry to say. You could imagine how much trouble I could have got into with my kids playing with my souvenirs outside. They had everything outside playing with them. I'm sure they would have had these machine guns outside playing with them too. So it's a good thing I gave them to a friend of mine to be deactivated and put in his collection.